What do you think of when you hear the term domestic abuse? For many people, an image of a black eye or a bruised lip comes to mind. These are physical signs of violence, but domestic abuse is often hidden and can take many forms, including psychological, physical, sexual, emotional, verbal, or even economic. There are 2.3 million victims of domestic abuse each year, aged 16 to 74. Domestic abuse is a hugely destructive problem, and we have a collective responsibility to tackle it. For those experiencing abuse, the workplace can be a safe space away from their abuser. However, with the exponential shift to working from home over the past year, many people have been locked down with their perpetrator. The domestic violence charity Refuge has reported an increase of over 60% in calls to their helpline since lockdown began. And with home working becoming a norm, many employees continue to be at risk, and abuse can be even harder to detect. Today, we'll hear from Charlie Godolphin, Domestic Abuse Lead at Lloyds Banking Group, to understand the approach Lloyds take to domestic abuse.
At Lloyds Banking Group, our purpose is to help Britain prosper, and we believe that we have a responsibility to address some of the social, economic and environmental challenges that the UK is facing, and that includes domestic and economic abuse. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. And when we've got 30 million customers and over 65,000 colleagues, sadly that means that at any one time, a huge proportion of our customers and colleagues are going to be living in a domestic abuse situation. So, really it's something that we can't ignore. Our approach to domestic abuse is that it sits at the heart of our wellbeing strategy. That consists of healthy minds, healthy bodies, healthy finances, and healthy relationships, which has enabled us to develop some interventions which raise awareness, but also empower our colleagues to support themselves, to support each other, and to support our customers also. We recognise we are not experts on this issue. So over the last number of years, we've worked with charities, including Surviving Economic Abuse, Safe Lives and Tender, as well as our own independent foundations, to help us create that wide range of practical support and solutions to help people. Just because we're not experts on the issue doesn't mean that we don't have an important role to play. And no matter how big or small our organisations are, we do have a duty of care to look after our employees. As the coronavirus restrictions begin to ease across the UK, charities are telling us to expect a rise in the number of victims who are reaching out to support. So I think it's really important that as employers we're prepared to respond. Just last year, we launched an emergency assistance programme, and that's where we cover the cost of an emergency hotel accommodation and one-to-one support for a colleague and their children if they are in an emergency situation. Each case is different, and so we adopt a flexible approach to our leave policy, for example. So that means that line managers are empowered to provide colleagues with the paid leave that they need to attend appointments or for emergency leave, whatever it is that they need. We've also run a series of communications campaigns to help raise awareness. So that's involved rolling out over 15,000 posters on the backs of male and female toilet doors in our head offices and branches as well, to raise awareness of the different types of abuse, but also to signpost support. One of the things that we'll be looking at is to run a session specifically on how domestic abuse affects people from minority groups and backgrounds too, and what support is available, so that we can make sure that our Black, Asian and minority ethnic colleagues who identify as LGBTQ, and also colleagues with a disability can really seek the support that they need and that specialist advice. Line managers can play a really important role, so looking out for sudden changes in behaviour, for example, or to the quality of that employee's work for unexplained reasons. Are there sudden changes in the way that an employee has started to dress? So, for example, excessive clothing on hot days. And that's something that you can try and pick up on. And then I think line managers can really ask some open and empathetic questions as well to let them know to colleagues that they are there. Questions such as, how are you doing at the moment? How are things at home? Or, I've noticed you don't quite seem yourself. Is anything the matter? It can be really helpful prompts to enable a colleague to feel comfortable to open up and disclose. There's a practical role as well that our line managers can play. So, whether that's around signposting support, if that's external support, things like the Bright Sky app, our EAP service as well, but also some of those practical workplace things that we can put in place, such as the emergency leave that we have available, offering to change a colleague's work mobile phone number, for example. Flexibility in working hours can also be important, but also some of those security guidelines, so making sure that colleague doesn't work alone or isn't working in an isolated area. The last 12 to 18 months have been really quite unusual. The coronavirus pandemic has brought domestic abuse to the forefront, and as you said, for many, the home has become the workplace. It's made it much harder for colleagues and line managers to spot signs of abuse, and of course it's also made it much harder for victims to seek support. So we did launch a couple of new initiatives, and we were also the first bank to sign up to the government's #YouAreNotAlone campaign as well. We also reacted quite quickly by setting up a series of webinars for colleagues to be able to dial into, where we invited charities such as Save Lives and Surviving Economic Abuse to talk about how to spot some of those signs when you are working from home, and how victims can still access support even though we're in a lockdown situation. What works for one employer might not necessarily work for another. So by working in partnership with charities and organisations such as the Employees Initiative Against Domestic Abuse, I think they can really help us as employers to take the right approach to providing practical support for victims and survivors, whether they be customers or colleagues.
Thanks so much to Charlie for speaking to us. You've provided a real insight into the many routes businesses can provide support, both through formal routes and signposting to dedicated resources. Domestic abuse is a key Build Back Responsibly objective of Business in the Community's Wellbeing Leadership Team, and we ask businesses not to shy away from this challenging issue and to update policies on domestic abuse. BITC Domestic Abuse has 4 calls to action for employers: recognise, respond, refer, and record. There's a great deal of information and resources we've touched on in this video, and I'd encourage you to visit BITC's website, where you can find further information and guidance, including an evidence-based toolkit for businesses created in partnership with leading agencies and government departments using the links shown on screen now. Thank you for watching.